I was sitting out on the porch the other afternoon, sipping sweet tea with my neighbor Helen, when she told me something that made my heart sink. Her brother, Pete, had been out mowing his lawn when he suddenly felt off. Not sick exactly, just tired, a little dizzy. He brushed it off, figuring it was the heat, or maybe he hadn't had enough water. By the time his wife noticed the way he was talking sounded a bit strange, precious minutes had slipped away. It turned out Pete was having a stroke. And here's the part that startled me most. In the United States, someone has a stroke every 40 seconds. Every 40 seconds. That means while you and I are chatting here, another life could be turned upside down. Now, I know stroke is one of those things we've all heard about, but it often feels like something that happens to other people. The truth is, especially for those of us over 60, we're in the group most at risk, and the signs aren't always as dramatic as we expect. Sometimes they sneak up quietly, looking a lot like everyday tiredness or just feeling off. And that's exactly why today's conversation is so important. Recognizing these signals early can make all the difference in recovery, independence, and even survival. So, stay with me, because in the next few minutes we're going to walk through the common signs, the lesser-known ones, and how you can spot them in yourself or someone you love. And if you find this helpful, I'd be so grateful if you gave this video a like, subscribed to Vibrant Elders, and shared your thoughts in the comments below. Now let's start with the very first thing you need to know: how these strokes actually happen in the first place. You know, the word stroke can sound intimidating, almost like one of those big, scary medical terms we'd rather not think about. But I want you to imagine something a lot more familiar. Picture your brain as a busy little city. Every second of every day, it's full of action, thoughts zipping around like cars on a highway, memories tucked away in cozy little neighborhoods, and messages traveling down roads to tell your arms and legs what to do. Now, just like a real city, this one runs on roads. Only in your brain, those roads are blood vessels. Instead of cars, they're carrying oxygen and nutrients, the fuel that keeps the whole place running. A stroke is what happens when the traffic in that city suddenly grinds to a halt or a major water pipe bursts. In most strokes, we call these ischemic strokes. It's like a massive traffic jam. Something, often a blood clot, is blocking the road. That clot keeps the oxygen-rich blood from reaching part of the brain, and without that oxygen, brain cells start to shut down fast. In other cases, these are hemorrhagic strokes. It's like a pipe bursting. A weak spot in a blood vessel gives way, and blood leaks out into the brain. That flooding causes damage just like water flooding a neighborhood would. Here's the part that's important to remember. Your brain doesn't keep a spare oxygen tank in the closet. It needs a constant, steady supply. So when blood can't get through, even for just a few minutes, brain cells start to die. And unlike a scraped knee, your brain can't just grow new cells to replace the lost ones. That's why every second counts. Doctors often say, time is brain, because in the first minutes and hours of a stroke, quick action can mean the difference between a full recovery and lifelong changes. Now, I know that sounds serious, and it is, but understanding this is powerful. Once you know what's actually going on inside the brain, those early warning signs we'll talk about make a lot more sense. You'll know they're not just random quirks or passing feelings. They're the brain's way of shouting for help. Let's take an example. Think about your favorite morning crossword puzzle. One minute you're filling in the squares like you've done 100 times, and the next you're having trouble remembering a word you've known for years. Or maybe you try to take a sip of your coffee, and your hand doesn't quite cooperate. That's not your imagination. That could be part of this city in your brain losing its connection because the blood supply has been blocked or interrupted. When you see it that way, stroke stops being this mysterious, far-off event and becomes something you can picture, understand, and, most importantly, respond to. And once you understand it, the next step is learning exactly how to spot those classic signs people talk about and how to check for them fast. When most people think of a stroke, they imagine someone suddenly collapsing, unable to move or speak. But in reality, the warning signs can be much more subtle. So subtle that if you're not paying attention, you might write them off as tiredness, stress, or just having an off day. That's where the FAST test comes in. It's a simple, 4-letter memory tool that can help you spot trouble in seconds. And it's something every single one of us should have tucked away in the back of our minds. The F stands for face drooping. You don't need a medical degree to check this one. If you're chatting with someone and their smile looks uneven, Maybe one corner of their mouth just isn't lifting. That's a sign the muscles on one side of their face aren't getting the right messages from the brain. I remember once talking with a friend at church, and halfway through our conversation, her expression looked slightly lopsided. It was so faint, I almost thought I imagined it. But she was having a stroke, right there in the fellowship hall. A is for arm weakness. This is another easy check. Ask the person to lift both arms straight in front of them, palms up, like they're holding a tray of cookies fresh from the oven. If one arm drifts downward, even just a little, that's a red flag. That weak arm is your brain's way of saying a part of it isn't getting the oxygen it needs. S is for speech difficulty. This doesn't always mean complete loss of speech. It could be slurred words, strange pauses, or even using the wrong words without realizing it. If you ask them to repeat a simple sentence, something like, "It's a sunny day," and it comes out garbled or confused, take it seriously. I've heard stories where someone at a family picnic suddenly started mixing up words, and everyone just laughed it off as a senior moment. Minutes later, they were in the ER. And finally, T stands for time to call 911. This is the most important letter of all. You might be tempted to wait and see if the symptoms pass. Don't. A stroke is not something you sleep off. Every minute lost is more brain function lost. In the United States, emergency responders are trained to recognize and prioritize stroke symptoms, and getting medical help fast can mean access to clot-busting treatments that work best within a few short hours. What's so powerful about the FAST test is that it's not complicated. It doesn't require any special tools, and it works whether you're in your living room, at the grocery store, or on vacation. Once you know it, you can use it anywhere, for yourself, a spouse, a neighbor, or even a stranger in the checkout line. And while FAST covers the classic, well-known symptoms, it's not the whole story. There are other, lesser-known signs that can sneak by unnoticed, and those can be just as important to catch. We've talked about the classic signs of a stroke, but here's the thing. Not every stroke plays by the textbook. Sometimes, the body sends out warning flares that look nothing like the big, dramatic symptoms you see on TV. These lesser-known signs can be easy to miss, and because they're not as widely talked about, people often ignore them until it's too late. One of them is sudden confusion or trouble understanding speech. This isn't about forgetting where you put your glasses or losing your train of thought. That happens to all of us. I'm talking about sitting in a conversation and suddenly not quite grasping what the other person is saying, like their words are in another language. I once met a woman at a senior center who told me she suddenly couldn't follow a simple recipe she'd made for years. That was her brain waving a big red flag. Another overlooked sign is sudden trouble seeing, in one or both eyes. It could be blurry vision, double vision, or even a sudden dark spot. People sometimes think it's just a smudge on their glasses or dry eyes. But if it comes on suddenly and without explanation, it could mean part of the brain that handles vision is being cut off from blood flow. Then there's sudden dizziness or loss of balance. We all know the feeling of standing up too quickly and getting a head rush. But if that dizziness strikes out of nowhere while you're sitting still, walking, or reaching for something on a shelf, and especially if it's paired with nausea or trouble walking straight, that's not something to brush off. One that surprises a lot of folks is the severe headache, often described as the worst headache of my life. This isn't your run-of-the-mill tension headache. It comes on suddenly, like a lightning bolt. That can be a sign of bleeding in the brain, especially with a hemorrhagic stroke. And here's a truly sneaky one: numbness in unusual places. Most people know to look for numbness in an arm or leg, but what if it's just part of your face, one side of your tongue, or even a patch on your cheek? Those can be just as telling. The tricky part is that each of these signs can also be caused by other things: fatigue, dehydration, even inner ear issues. But here's the rule I always share. If the symptom comes on suddenly, out of the blue, and feels different from your normal ups and downs, don't take chances. I think about a man I met at a community garden who had sudden blurry vision while watering his tomatoes. He decided to walk it off. By the time he got to the ER, the damage was done. That's the kind of story we can prevent if we know what to look for and act fast. And while these signs might be subtle, sometimes the brain gives us an even earlier nudge, what doctors call a mini-stroke, a warning shot before the real danger hits. If a major stroke is like a sudden power outage in your home, then a TIA, or transient ischemic attack, is more like the lights flickering for a few seconds before coming back on. It feels temporary, but it's a serious warning that something is wrong in the wiring, and it should never be ignored. A TIA happens when blood flow to part of the brain gets blocked for a short time, sometimes just minutes, occasionally a few hours, and then clears on its own. Because the blockage doesn't last long enough to cause permanent damage, the symptoms disappear. And that's where the danger lies. Too many people think, well, I'm fine now, so it must not have been anything serious. The truth is, a TIA is the brain's way of sending up a flare, telling you that a bigger, potentially life-changing stroke could be right around the corner, sometimes within days. The symptoms of a TIA can look exactly like a stroke: slurred speech, weakness or numbness on one side, sudden vision problems, trouble walking, or confusion. The only difference is they vanish quickly. I remember meeting a retired teacher named Bill at a library event. He told me he'd been in his kitchen making breakfast when he suddenly couldn't grip his coffee mug. His wife noticed his words sounded jumbled. Within 10 minutes, he was back to normal. He thought it was nothing, until a week later, he had a full-blown stroke. That's why doctors often compare a TIA to a fire drill before the real fire. The event itself might not burn the house down, but it's a warning that conditions are ripe for disaster if nothing changes. If you or someone you love has even the slightest suspicion of a TIA, the response should be the same as for a stroke. Call 911 right away. Don't drive yourself, don't wait to see if it passes, and don't schedule a checkup next week. You need a full medical evaluation immediately. In the US, that usually means a trip to the emergency department, where they can run imaging tests like a CT scan or MRI to see what happened and why. Catching a TIA in time gives doctors a chance to step in, maybe adjusting blood pressure medication, prescribing a blood thinner, or treating underlying conditions like carotid artery disease to greatly reduce the risk of a major stroke later. Think of it this way. If you were driving and your brake light came on, you wouldn't wait for your brakes to fail before getting them checked. The same goes for your brain. These short, sudden episodes are not harmless quirks. They are the body's way of saying, pay attention, I need help. And while TIAs and strokes can happen to anyone, certain everyday habits in the American lifestyle make them far more likely. And those habits are worth talking about next. We've covered what a stroke is and how to spot it. But here's the part we often don't like to think about. Many strokes don't just happen out of nowhere. They build quietly over years, fueled by certain habits and choices that are all too common in our American way of life. The good news is, once we recognize them, we can start making small changes that add up to a big difference. Let's start with food, because it's such a big part of our culture. Here in the US, we love our flavor, from salty chips to smoky barbecue, from diner breakfasts to big holiday spreads. But a high-salt diet can push blood pressure up like a balloon ready to pop, and over time, that constant pressure can wear down the walls of our blood vessels, making them more likely to clog or burst. Processed foods, fast food, and restaurant meals often pack way more sodium than we realize. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy a good rack of ribs or a slice of pizza. It just means being mindful of how often and balancing it out with fresh fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. Then there's movement, or the lack of it. Retirement can be a blessing, but it's easy to slip into spending too much time sitting in a recliner, watching TV, or scrolling on a tablet. Our bodies were made to move, and regular activity helps keep blood flowing smoothly. Even a daily walk around the block, tending a garden, or dancing in the living room can keep blood vessels healthier and reduce stroke risk. High blood pressure, diabetes, and high cholesterol are also major stroke drivers, and they often go hand in hand with our modern lifestyle. Skipping regular checkups or forgetting to take prescribed medications is more common than we'd like to admit. But those little pills in the morning, they might just be the thing keeping your blood vessels open and your brain safe. And we can't ignore the role of smoking and stress. Smoking damages blood vessels and makes the blood thicker, like putting sludge through your plumbing system. Stress, on the other hand, triggers hormones that can raise blood pressure and inflammation. And while none of us can avoid stress entirely, we can find ways to manage it, whether it's through prayer, meditation, hobbies, or simply taking a quiet moment on the porch with a cup of tea. I've met people who made just one change, cutting down on salt, walking 20 minutes a day, or finally quitting smoking, and saw their blood pressure drop within months. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to overhaul your entire life in one day. Start small, be consistent, and remember that prevention is just as important as knowing the warning signs. And when those signs do show up, knowing exactly what to do in the moment can make all the difference. That's what we need to talk about next. When it comes to strokes, there's a phrase doctors use that I think sticks better than any medical term. Time is brain. Every minute during a stroke, brain cells are dying. That's not meant to scare you. It's meant to give you power. Because the faster you act, the more of yourself or your loved one you can protect. The single most important thing you can do if you suspect a stroke is happening is call 911 immediately. Not your spouse, not your neighbor, 911. And here's why. Emergency medical teams are trained to recognize stroke symptoms the second they arrive. They can alert the hospital before you even get there, so the doctors are ready to act the moment you roll in. That preparation can save precious minutes, and in a stroke, minutes are everything. One thing I hear often is, well, I didn't want to make a fuss, or I thought maybe I could sleep it off. I understand the hesitation. None of us wants to feel like we're overreacting. But here's the reality. If it turns out not to be a stroke, no harm done. If it is a stroke and you delay, you could lose speech, movement, memory, or even your life. It's a gamble you never want to take. You might wonder why speed matters so much. For certain types of strokes, there are clot-busting medications, like TPA, that can restore blood flow to the brain. But they work best, and sometimes only, if given within a narrow window, usually 3 to 4.5 hours after symptoms start. That sounds like a lot of time until you remember that it includes recognizing the signs, calling 911, getting to the hospital, and running the necessary scans to confirm it's a stroke. That's why wait and see is the enemy. If you're with someone who may be having a stroke, stay calm, keep them comfortable, and note the exact time symptoms began. Paramedics and doctors need that information to decide the best treatment. Don't give them food, drink, or medication unless a doctor specifically says so. Choking risk is high when the brain's control over swallowing is affected. And please, don't try to drive yourself or have someone else drive you unless you absolutely have no other choice. Riding in an ambulance isn't just about speed. It's about having trained professionals with you every step of the way in case things change suddenly. I think of strokes like a house fire. If you saw smoke in your kitchen, you wouldn't wait to see if it stopped on its own. You'd call the fire department right away. That same urgency is what can save your brain, your independence, and your life. The last thing we need to talk about is how to hold on to that sense of control, not fear, and how knowing these signs empowers you to protect yourself and the people you love. After hearing about strokes and their warning signs, it can be easy to walk away feeling a little uneasy. But I want you to know, this isn't about living in fear, it's about living with confidence. When you recognize the signs, you're not powerless. You're the first line of defense, whether it's for yourself, your spouse, a neighbor, or even a stranger in the grocery store. That knowledge is a form of strength. Think about how many moments in life we spend preparing for just-in-case situations. We keep flashlights ready in case the power goes out. We carry an umbrella because rain might come. We double-check the locks before bed. Knowing the signs of a stroke is no different. It's another way of protecting what matters most. I've seen the difference it can make firsthand. A woman in my community once noticed her husband's arm drift down when he was holding their morning coffee. She remembered the fast test we talked about in a workshop. Instead of brushing it off, she called 911 right away. By that evening, he was in recovery, regaining his speech and movement. She didn't just save his life, she saved his independence. That's the power you hold when you take this information seriously. It's not about memorizing medical terms or becoming a doctor overnight. It's about paying attention, trusting your instincts, and acting quickly when something feels off. And here's something I find comforting. By talking about this openly, you can help create a ripple effect. If you share what you've learned today with your walking group, your church friends, or your family over Sunday dinner, you're giving them the same life-saving knowledge. It only takes one person to notice the signs and speak up for a life to be saved. That one person could be you. Of course, it's also worth remembering that while we can't control everything, we do have influence over our risk. Staying active, eating a bit more fresh and a little less processed, managing stress, and keeping up with doctor visits. These aren't just chores, they're investments in more good years, more moments with the people we love. So, hold on to this. Strokes don't wait for a convenient moment, but you don't have to wait either. You now know what to look for, how to respond, and why quick action changes everything. That's something to feel proud of, not afraid of. As we wrap this up, let's take what we've learned and turn it into a source of empowerment. A reminder that even in life's most urgent moments, knowledge, calm, and action can carry us through. We've covered a lot today, from what a stroke actually is, to the fast test, to those tricky, lesser-known signs that can sneak right past you if you're not paying attention. We've talked about mini strokes, the everyday habits that can raise your risk, and what to do in those critical first moments. And through all of it, there's been one simple thread. When you know what to look for, you have the power to make a difference. I want you to leave this conversation feeling capable, not worried. Because the truth is, the people who spot strokes fastest aren't always doctors or nurses. They're friends, family members, and neighbors who paid attention and spoke up. It's knowing that a crooked smile isn't just a cute quirk, that sudden dizziness isn't always nothing, and that calling 911 right away could change the rest of someone's life. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Keep this knowledge close. Share it with the people you care about, at your next book club meeting, over coffee with friends, or with your grandkids when they visit. You never know when that one conversation could save a life. And if you ever suspect a stroke, don't hesitate, don't wait, act fast. If you found this helpful, I'd be so grateful if you liked this video, subscribed to Vibrant Elders, and shared your own thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else to be ready when it matters most. We can't stop time, but we can make the most of the minutes we have. And sometimes, those minutes are enough to keep a life whole. Stay aware, stay strong, and keep looking out for each other.